The Catholic Church told the world these children were orphans. The Canadian government agreed. Both of them were lying. Quebec, 1940s. A province built on faith, family, and the unquestioned authority of the church. Every Sunday, families filled the pews. Every Sunday, priests reminded them that God was watching. But there was something else the church was doing in Quebec that nobody was supposed to see. Something that required paperwork. Something that required money. Something that required children. Thousands of them. Children who had done nothing wrong. Children whose only crime was being born poor, or illegitimate, or inconvenient. Children who were about to be reclassified. Not as orphans, not as wards of the state, but as mentally deficient. That single word, deficient, would destroy thousands of lives. And the people who signed the papers knew exactly what they were doing. Here is what they did not want you to know. In 1940s Quebec, the federal government paid the Catholic Church a fixed daily rate to house orphaned children in church-run institutions. The rate was modest. The rate for housing psychiatric patients was nearly 3 times higher. That is when the church made a decision. A financial decision. A decision that had nothing to do with God and everything to do with money. Healthy orphaned children, some as young as 3 years old, were handed over to church-run psychiatric institutions. Their files were altered. Their diagnoses were fabricated. A child who could read, write, and play was suddenly documented as mentally incompetent. A child who had never seen a doctor in their life was suddenly declared insane by one who had never examined them. No hearings, no second opinions, no parents to object, because the church had already made sure those parents had no legal standing. And with one stamp on one piece of paper, a child's entire future was erased. They were moved from orphanage dormitories into psychiatric wards. They slept beside adults with severe mental illness. They were given no schooling, because psychiatric patients did not need school. They were given no explanation, because no one believed they were intelligent enough to deserve one. They were given numbers instead of names. They wore identical gray uniforms. They ate in silence. They were not allowed to ask questions. And if they did, if they pushed back, if they cried too loudly, if they simply behaved like the children they were punished in ways that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Some were placed in solitary confinement. Some were strapped to beds. Some were subjected to electroconvulsive therapy. Children receiving electroconvulsive therapy because they were classified as mentally ill. Because someone sitting in a warm office had decided that classification was more profitable than the truth. The number of children moved through this system is still disputed. Conservative estimates say 20,000. Some researchers believe the number is higher. 20,000 children processed like paperwork, warehoused like inventory, and forgotten like they had never existed. And the province let it happen. The federal government funded it. The church administered it. And the rest of Quebec looked away, because the church said to look away, and in 1940s Quebec, you did not argue with the church. Maurice Duplessis was the premier of Quebec for most of this period. His government signed the agreements. His government approved the reclassifications. His name is written on the documents. These children became known as the Duplessis Orphans, named after the man whose government commodified them like livestock. He died in 1959. He never faced a single consequence. Not one. But here is where the story becomes something else entirely. Here is where it stops being just history. The children grew up. Some of them survived. And when they got out, when they were finally released into a world that had pretended they did not exist, they remembered everything. They remembered the wards. They remembered the uniforms. They remembered what was done to them in the name of medicine. They remembered the names of the institutions. They remembered the faces of the people who had signed their papers. And they started talking to each other, quietly at first, then louder. Then they hired lawyers. They gathered documents. They found the intake forms with the fabricated diagnoses still written in ink. They found the financial agreements between the church and the government. They found the names. They found the money trail. And they brought all of it forward. In 1992, a group of Duplessis orphans formally organized and began demanding justice from the Quebec government. They wanted acknowledgement. They wanted compensation. They wanted the church and the state to stand up and say, "We did this, and it was wrong." What they got instead was silence, then delay, then a settlement offer so inadequate that many survivors publicly refused it. The Catholic Church offered $25 million to be split among survivors. an offer that worked out to less than $10,000 per person for decades of abuse, wrongful institutionalization, and a stolen childhood. Many survivors rejected it outright. They said it was not justice. They said it was an attempt to make the story disappear cheaply. They were right, because here is what the church would not do. They would not issue a full formal apology. They would not open all the records. They would not name the individuals who had signed the fraudulent diagnoses. They wanted the money to be the end of the conversation. It was not the end, because there is one more thing, one more piece of this story that most people have never heard. One piece that changes everything. Some of the Duplessis orphans were buried inside the institutions where they died, buried in unmarked graves on institutional grounds. No headstones, no names, no families notified, just a body and a number in a ledger that the church kept locked away. When survivors began demanding to know what happened to the children who never came out, they were told the records were incomplete. They were told the graves could not be confirmed. They were told there was nothing left to find. Then, in 2004, construction workers in Montreal began excavating the grounds of a former psychiatric institution once operated by the church. They found bones, human bones, in an area that had never been disclosed as a burial site. The Quebec government ordered a partial investigation. The investigation was quietly closed. The full contents of what was found have never been made public. Think about that. Construction workers found human remains on the grounds of an institution where thousands of falsely diagnosed children had been warehoused, forgotten, and died. And the investigation was closed. And no one was charged. And no one was named. And the church is still standing. And the government of Quebec has still never issued a full formal apology to the Duplessis orphans. These children were real. Their suffering was documented. The fraud was proven in black and white. The money trail exists. And still, no justice. This is not ancient history. The last survivors of the Duplessis orphans are alive right now. Some of them are still fighting. Some of them have been fighting for over 30 years. They are running out of time. And most of the world still does not know their names. You know it now. You watched until the end. That means something. If this story made you feel something, share it. Not for an algorithm, not for a page, but because 20,000 children were buried in silence, and the people responsible are counting on the world staying quiet. Break that silence. Share this video right now and put it in front of someone who deserves to know the truth. Drop the word justice in the comments so we know you stayed until the end. And if you want more buried history that powerful people tried to erase, follow Odd Archive and recommend this page to your friends right now. Because the only way stories like this survive is if people like you refuse to let them die.